Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rush Hour podcast. Today's guest is the host of the podcast Morgan's Pop Talks. She built up a massive social media presence talking pop culture. Who better to wrap up 2024 with than Morgan Page? How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you. I think we share a time zone now. Are we Central Time Zone?
I'm in Eastern Standard, so 1 hour time difference this time.
But are you still in Ohio?
I am, yes,
Okay,
Cleveland.
I'm in Tennessee now, so I'm moving slowly closer to you. And congratulations on the wedding. You just got married.
Yeah, thank you. Well, technically, I mean, our story is a story. Technically, I've been married legally for a little over a year because we had a 90-day fiance it up. My husband's from South Africa. So he came over on a visa. We eloped on a beach. And then this past summer in June, we got all of the family together. So all of his family came over from South Africa. That was really special. So we're still going with the October date for our actual anniversary. But I technically have like 3 different anniversaries if
You
if
know,
you really want to get into it.
ladies love to keep the anniversaries rolling. Like my wife still expects like a dating anniversary gift. I'm
Yeah.
like, when you get married, you ditch the engagement and the dating. It's like you just get one anniversary. Like that's all we're doing now.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
was better? Was it the elopement? What was a more I don't know. Which experience did you prefer, that or the reception? They're quite different
Yeah.
celebrations.
My personality, I tend to be more laid back. All of the big planning stuff I really didn't vibe with. However, I will say, with us and our families being so far apart, it was really special to have everybody together just because there probably will never be another time where all of us are in the same location. I mean, his parents are in their 70s. So to fly from South Africa, it's like 24-hour flight day to get them all here and his brother and friends from London. I would 10 times 10 do both over again. So
Yeah, look, for all these people that get divorced and then remarried, I'm like, who wants to redo all of that nonsense?
right.
Like, that's a one-time thing. So are your in-laws, are they fans of your show? Do they consume your content? I always find that interesting. Like, do they understand
They don't
social
get it.
media? They don't get it?
They don't get it, no, and we've tried to explain it a couple different times, but it's funny because they also don't understand what my husband does, their son, but we kind of work together because my husband is a brand designer for, an email marketing company that helps creators like me, monetize through newsletters. So he's always on the back end of stuff, sending my newsletter and designing me merch and making sure that my setup looks good. Like this is all David. So we work really well together.
You know, that it's so great to find a partner that can grow with you, because
Mhm.
when you do content creation, your brand is your life. They can be very interchanging. So like, God bless my wife, but every walk we go on, it's like, how can we crack that algorithm? It's like it's
Yeah.
not sexy, but it's like it's important because you want, it's like you believe in each other, and
Mhm.
I'm sure like your channel is interesting because you're knocking on the door of 200,000 Instagram followers. That's a big deal, right? You got a big podcast audience. What did you expect you would accomplish getting into it, and have you sort of surpassed your initial thoughts of what you would be doing with the show?
Honestly, when I started, I had no intention on doing anything in a professional manner, right? I started doing TikTok in 2020 during the pandemic. At that time I worked on a morning radio show. My background is in broadcast. I have a degree. Worked on a morning show for 6 years here in Cleveland, and my job on the show was to do the pop culture report. So I was always talking about, everything that I report on now on Instagram, but it wasn't really until lockdown. I was broadcasting from home. I couldn't go to London to see David. We didn't see each other for like a year and a half, pretty much. I lived alone. So I basically just started repurposing what I was doing on the morning show on TikTok. TikTok was not what it is today back then. People didn't realize the power it could have, in creating your own brand identity and moving forward in a business sense. But once I saw that it was connecting with people there, then I started to think, well, maybe this is something that I can just see where it goes, and I still never had any like official goals with it. And one thing led to another where, the TikTok following led to an Instagram following, and then Instagram led to a podcast. And really my only goal, once I got deep in it, and I've always loved it. So once I saw kind of where it could go, my goal has always been to be able to do it full time and to be able to make an income off of it. So I've, made that goal. I still want to grow, obviously, as everybody does. And I think it's a unique time because we're getting things potentially taken away, revenue streams and TikTok and stuff. But I think also that's kind of why I wanted to, spread my roots around, do Instagram and TikTok, do a Patreon and a podcast, and all of these other things that could be potential revenue streams in case one of them is no longer available. So, where to go from here? I still don't really know if I have any big milestones that I want to hit. My goal has always been just to be able to do what I love and to be able to support myself and one day a family doing it.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for your channel. I think it was probably a year or so ago. You maybe had leveled up with some new brand photos. And I was like, oh, Morgan's got it going on. Yeah, like you've done a really good job of kind of, because when it comes to pop culture, it's really about having a voice at the water cooler. That's what podcasting and Instagram is. It's like, we're all going to find out the news. What do you have to say about it? And that's what separates the brand of people who put their face in front of things versus like just someone who's a producer who's like, here's the news. And I think you do a great job of like, no one can steal your point of view when it comes to different subjects. So what's your breakdown between stories you need to cover because your audience is going to eat it up versus stories that are interesting to you? Because it's not always mutually exclusive. It's kind of like, that part of the river where the river meets the ocean. And it's that like kind of that mixing of like, I love this, my audience loves this. How do we entertain it all? And is there any subject that you've tried to dive into and your audience is like, nope? Like what's that conversation with yourself like?
I think it's interesting because this might surprise you, but something that is not my favorite thing to cover, but I'm stuck there, is Bachelor stuff. I'm like off the Bachelor bandwagon. I really am. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I watch so much other reality TV that I just see how bad it is in comparison, to like a Love is Blind or any show on Bravo. But I do know, like, my Patreon, I cannot let down the Bachelor Patreon girlies that won it. So I'm like sitting there every Monday night for what feels like 6 hours, even though it's only 2, taking notes and stuff. What surprised me is how big of a reaction I get from Love is Blind stuff. That stuff goes off the Richter. And I'm not like the number one Love is Blind pop culture reporter, right? But anytime that I do it, it just blows up. Now I think that's the Netflix effect, right? Anybody in the entire world can watch Love is Blind and they have a lot of opinions about it too. Love Island this year was crazy, but I enjoyed that ride so much. I think when it comes to how I navigate whether I care about something or not is, okay, a really good example, and I mean no shade because I bet they're both lovely people. The Jen and Sasha stuff. I'm like so over it. I cannot talk about it any longer. So I'll do like the basics of it, but if it starts to get too deep into the lore, I'm out. And like I can't pretend like I am interested to go this deep into, 20 posts later, 30 posts later. But if it's breaking in new information, that always is like a motivating factor to me. So I think it really is just whatever is intriguing to people too. When a news story breaks and you're like, oh my gosh, it's really easy for me to get on and do it. But on days where it's a slower news day and you're looking at, the same 12 pictures of Jen and Sasha, I'm like, I can't do this anymore, you
Yeah,
guys.
we used to call it like barrel scraping season, and I just don't have the energy to barrel scrape. It's
Yeah.
a lot of effort. The actual metaphor of scraping a barrel, you're scraping the bottom of that wine barrel or whiskey barrel trying to get any remnants. It's like garbage, and it's
Yeah.
like I just once I had a baby, I'm like, I don't have the time. I don't have the.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
can imagine.
but I still like Bachelor content is a little chum that gets people back, YouTube, and they reward that content because it's a strong niche because it's on network TV. But like you
Mhm.
said, I mean, Love is Blind has really shown you can really blow things up internationally in a show like The Bachelor is just stuck to our, rather large but, isolated country here. So if you could, okay, I know you're married and all that. I know you're happy and all that. But if you could go on any one of these shows as a contestant, whether it's one of these dating shows or else reality wise, what would you go on?
I've actually applied to be on this show 4 times. I got interviewed by production twice, but I didn't make it further, is Survivor. Can you believe that?
Wow, I mean, that has to be the best experiential one. Like that's got such a pure. But you know what's so funny about Survivor is they haven't increased the lottery, the
I
amount.
know, right? At 47 seasons and they're
And
still at 1,000,000.
I've done the math. So just due to basic inflation, the pot should be 1.8 million at this point. Isn't that
Wow.
crazy?
That is crazy.
And now you see, I don't know, did you watch Beast Games? Have you seen that show? It just dropped on Amazon.
No, but I've heard about it. I know the
This
premise.
guy is just giving out, I think
Yeah.
he's up to 8 or 9 million. It's a $5 million pot, but he's just throwing $1 million left and right for people to make these decisions. And what's so interesting about that game show is that I mean, I look at Mr. Beast, whether people like his YouTube content or not, but I look at that as like he understands what drives the algorithm.
Mhm.
And it's different than what drives the algorithm in reality TV, but it all comes down to, are you going to get somebody to click on your videos?
Right.
And like, have you developed any sort of recipe for what works for you, or you just said, hey, people are clicking, let's not overthink it?
Well, honestly, a lot of it goes back to my radio background, working on the terminology is like top 40, right? So we're playing Justin Bieber, all that stuff, but we have 3 minutes in between breaks to get our point across. So you have to get your point across as quick as possible. I know it's a little different, in YouTube when you're doing long form content, but I literally do sit there and sometimes I'll just go on a bit of a rant, but I write out all my scripts and I try to come up with the most interesting 3 to 5 second hook that will get people to continue to watch it. And that's something that I really learned in radio. We used to have to, every single Monday, we would have to go into my boss's office and listen back to a whole hour of our show while he just sat there and told us everything that we did wrong. And there would be a few moments where we did something right, but it really did train me on how to effectively communicate something that would get somebody's attention.
That's so interesting because, in the world of stand-up comedy, every successful comedian recommends listening back to what you said. And
Mhm.
it's very painful to do because who wants to do that?
It's
But
horrible.
what you think versus what you say, that's what makes somebody good at what they do is can I speak at the tone and use my voice as the tool that can really grab someone's attention. What TikTok in short form content seems to do is like, it's not rocket science. It's just like any sort of like essay you write. You need a real strong, like you need to prosecute your point. Here's what I'm going to talk about and then deliver it. But
Mhm.
that's still really hard to do. And it seems like obviously it's been working out for you.
Well, thank you. I try.
Now, because it reminds me of, a lot of actors like back in the day, they would get their start in soap operas and they would say like that was the training they needed to learn all of the ins and outs of like, memorizing lines and in the high turnover, like the shocking amount of like sitcom actors that came from soap opera world. It's the same framework, just a completely different tone. So would you go back to radio after the success of this, or have you been too have you just enjoyed the working for yourself too much?
I'll never go back.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say never, never say never, right? But, a big thing too when I got married was the potential of having a flexible schedule. My husband works completely remote. He can work from anywhere in the world and his family lives in South Africa. So now that I have, built this platform and I'm able to do things remote too, we want to, spend extended periods of time there. And that's something that, in the past, was really restrictive, and rightfully so, right? Like I can't just run around the world and do a broadcast job from wherever when I'm working for a company, right? But once you get the taste of working for yourself too, I feel like it would be really hard to go back to anything else.
Oh yeah, like having a boss or someone controlling what you do. And
Yeah.
I feel like radio and same thing with TV when you work on the news, there's all these jobs. People are always shuffling papers and like I do seven people's jobs, but I get paid for seven people's worth of work. So it's like
Yeah.
when you work for yourself, you can have your you can be like loose. And if we get offline right now and some crazy story happens, I'm hitting the buttons and we're going at it. You don't have
Right.
red tape, which I think makes shows like yours and mine and others more, I think, relatable because we can just kind of like you can pull over on a Sunday and be like, honey, we need to cover this. Does that happen in your with your relationship where you're like mid dinner and your phone blows up and you're like, I got to take this one?
Yes, it happened to me this week in the car too. We were driving and James Kennedy posted his Instagram story, breaking his silence. I literally had to pull over, was late to my workout class because I filmed that reaction video in the driver's seat of my car.
See, ladies and gentlemen, late to the workout class. Now, let me guess. The 2 weeks ago, there was James Kennedy was arrested for misdemeanor domestic violence. There was a lot up in the air about what actually went down. Somebody saw him put his hands on his girlfriend. At the time, she was kind of like sticking by him, but then she decided to get out, and we were like sort of waiting to hear what he had to say. Do you turn your alerts on for him at that point? Like, are you that zoned in, waiting for that news to break, or is it just people tagging you and things?
Yeah, no, I didn't turn any alerts on, but I am so actively checking that the people that I'm like stalking are at the top of my feed. The more you check somebody's page, the more their Instagram story icon gets pushed to the front of your algorithm and whatever. So literally when I opened up my Instagram, his story was the first that I saw. And at that point, he hadn't been on his stories at all. That and, following a lot of other Bravo accounts, people would just post, the picture of it. So immediately, as soon as I opened it, I saw the picture and I saw his story with the circle around it.
So what's interesting with him is we're not hearing many people in the Bravo world, I think, condemning strongly enough what went down.
Mhm.
Scandival happens a couple years ago. I hear about it when I'm on my honeymoon in Bali. I'm in the other side of the world and I hear about Scandival. And it was one of those words you hear and I'm like, you know what? I'm so sick of this. I need to know. I needed to dedicate an hour literally on my honeymoon to be like, what the hell's going on? And then I learn and then I tell my wife, like she gets all of her news through my filter, which is like, God bless her for, like entertaining me. But we hear, of course, there's this big, cheating scandal where Tom Sandoval cheated on his longtime girlfriend with Rachel Leviss. Rachel Leviss previously dated James Kennedy. So now it comes out that James Kennedy looks like he was arrested for domestic violence. And then there's these two other women in the past, another ex named Kristen, who have both said, yeah, he's abusive. Bravo's letting this guy stay on the show. What's your take on sort of the lack of conversation people are having? Do you think are they being shut down from talking about this? Do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think because well, I mean, lawyers obviously could shut it down. But at the same time, like people like Lala and Sheena, that just I mean, they were off to the races whenever Scandival broke. And kind of looking back, the sense that I'm getting is that it was that reaction was for the purpose of the show. They had to feed that machine and they knew that all of this stuff was going to come out. And the more they reacted to it, the more likely they would get picked up for another season. There's all this stuff that's unresolved. I feel like the fact that the show is no longer as we know it, I saw Lala on a Amazon Live or something today saying, I don't have a lot of opinions on other people's relationships. And I was like,
Yeah,
you?
it's like
Like, what?
and they're getting
That's crazy, and to me,
rightfully called out. Yeah.
it comes down to the fact that she was really only so upset about Scandival because she knew it would prolong her reality television, shelf life. If I'm really over the top about this and I have an opinion about this, it's going to make for great TV. But deep down, I don't think she actually cared. I mean, that's why she no longer has a friendship with Ariana. She's also not friends with Tom Sandoval anymore. So it's like, what was that all about? And to have somebody say, be so vocal about Scandival, to then flip around and say, I don't get involved in other people's relationships as soon as there's not, pen on paper contract for season 12, to me speaks volumes.
It's interesting because you talked about like the self-serving nature of keeping these shows going. And I think a lot of audiences forget that. Like every year, Bravo can decide, do we want to hire this cast or not? It's almost like Vanderpump is a different form of Survivor. On Survivor, you develop these friendships, but also you backstab them and you just kind of agree to it. Like, hey, sorry, playing the game. And on
Yeah.
Vanderpump, it's like you have to respect that they're going to try to drum the necessary noise up to a level that keeps this show being spoken about. But the collateral damage is Ariana, it wasn't worth it. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And by her, I mean, essentially kills the show by saying, I don't want to deal with anyone. I don't want to talk to him. And she sets a healthy boundary. The show may have been killed a year earlier if it wasn't for Scandival happening in the first place. But I think Bravo does a much better job of creating reality TV than The Bachelor. I think they probably have less red tape with the types of scenarios they get put under, because Bachelor's, it's a Disney show in the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all water sprinklers on the morning after the fantasy suite. It's like, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
And like I always view Bachelor contestants and Bravo personalities in two totally different playing fields. People on Bravo want to make their career out of being a reality TV personality, whereas people on The Bachelor, want to go on this show, have their 15 minutes, and then maybe become an influencer. To me, that's not the same, right? That's why I'm a bit more careful when talking about like personality traits of someone on The Bachelor as opposed to somebody on a Bravo show. Because someone who does Bravo and that is, their main income, they know what they signed up for, especially if they've been on more than one season. Like, half the time they're egging it on. So I just feel like they're two, even though they're technically under the same umbrella of reality TV category, I do not hold them in the same space.
what's your strategy like for, obviously a great way to grow your channel is to interview people that are worth being interviewed. And it seems as though if somebody's worth an interview, if something's big in their news world, everyone's coming after them. What's your sort of business strategy like trying to get people's attention? Are you DMing for interviews or tagging them? Like what's going on there?
Yeah, I would say it all goes down in the DMs. A lot of it goes down in the DMs. I do fortunately have a social media manager that has a lot of connections with other people in reality TV. So sometimes she connects us. But I also feel like I try very, very pointedly to not be, there's a lot of these like Bravo accounts that are really nasty, and maybe not even nasty is the word, but I honestly feel like I handle a lot of it with kid gloves. I don't ever want to come across too like mean. Even Nick Vial, who just shares his opinion, like I could never do that. Like I don't know how he does that. I just could not. My guilt eats me up inside if I don't say things in my opinion in like a nice way. But I also feel like it goes a long way with people on cast, because sometimes when I do get those interviews, they're like, you know, like when I interviewed Greg from The Bachelor, he was like, everybody on the internet was ripping me a new one, and you still had an opinion about it, but it wasn't like I deserve to burn in hell or whatever. And so I'm appreciative of that. And that's why I feel comfortable coming on and doing your podcast. But I have this conversation with David all the time. I'm like, how does Nick, and not to make this about Nick, but how does Nick, who like bashes everybody, get so many people to come on his podcast? But it's like me, nice girls finish last. Anybody that ABC has their claws in, I'm sure we can't get on the podcast unless it's like a miracle of God until a year later. So it's something that I'm learning, honestly, and I'm trying not to put too much stock in it, because there are moments where I get denied these interviews and I just have to remind myself, keep on keeping on. It's not going to happen overnight.
Oh, you know what? I've gotten denied so many. I don't even reach out to many Bachelor interviews at this point, but
Yeah.
I get denied and I go, "Are you kidding me? Do you know the numbers we're pulling? Like, you're out
Yeah.
of your mind if you think Bachelor Happy Hour is listenable." I mean, it's garbage, and it's not the host's fault. It's like they're just clocking in the paycheck. Grocery store Joe's watching a football game in the corner. It's that's what you get when
Yeah.
you're working at a chain restaurant. You're not
Mhm.
getting the mom and pop who care about the product they're slopping to you. And with Nick, I mean, I only criticize grifters, and you can be like he will be disingenuous with some of his criticisms because he'll know damn well how it's working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
He was coming after Katie Thurston for something, and I stuck up for her in a big way. For like weeks because he was being super hypocritical, and you have to be authentic, right? And you have to own what you're saying. If you're gonna trash someone for doing something, don't be going around and doing it yourself. And
Yeah.
I think he's able to disassociate from his own conscience when he criticizes others. I don't necessarily think it makes good programming, but I think he's done a really good job on the business level and getting the access that he's gotten.
Mhm.
And that's what he does. I mean, I mean, and I don't even mean this as I analyze everyone's content because I think it's interesting. And I think he's subpar as a communicator. He just mumbles and doesn't, I mean, but he does ask some decent questions. So
Yeah.
it's like sometimes criticisms are good. I get accused sometimes of being way too caffeinated. Okay, I could tone it down a little bit. I get it. It's like sometimes there's some good feedback once you like let your ego go away, and sometimes you have to. I always say crack an egg to make an omelet. Sometimes you have to realize you might not be the type who wants to ask tough questions. I was interviewing Nate from the winner of Michelle Young's season, and I was in my car, and people were like, "Why didn't you ask him like these really hard questions?" And I was like, "Because he's in my car."
Right.
Like at some point, I'm holding him hostage. We're on the
Yeah.
highway,
Yeah.
so people that are critical have no idea what can go into an interview. You might be, you're shooting from the hip, you're on the fly, you're trying to be loose with the conversation. And I don't really get much value out of those interviews where, okay, here's question 7. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll start here, but I want to talk to Morgan. I want to find out what makes you interesting, and then I have to trust my audience is going to be on board with that. And that's kind of like the barometer. That's like the North Star you have to follow when doing content is like, is this interesting to me?
Right. Right.
And so with you, I think what's interesting is like you find whatever passionate thing you want to talk about, and that energy travels through the chords, right? And then people can do with it what they want. What's a big goal for you? Because now you mentioned you have a social media manager. Was that a decision you had to make to hire somebody? Like how does that work? Taking that leap to kind of expanding your company.
Well, luckily and thankfully, they reached out to me, which was a blessing. It's one of those things where, like I said, I never started this to become an influencer, and I don't, brand myself as that. I don't. Not that every influencer makes a lot of money, but like I'm not making a lot of money on brand deals. It's just not at this particular moment in time. But I did see that it was a need. I was getting approached here and there to do mostly deals about TV. Like I remember the very first season that Salt Lake City Housewives came out, like I, was contacted to do a brand deal with them. And I was familiar with contracts, obviously working in media, but like who likes contracts to sit there and read it? Like half the time I don't understand it. I have all these questions and it just gets overwhelming, right? So I did know that I needed help in that area. I needed a middleman. And thankfully, the agency that I'm with, they specialize in people like me, content creators, and then even like I said, other reality TV personalities. So it's been a good connector and it's been a good learning experience. They're teaching me a lot about the business of, if I wanted to. And I don't ever think that I would just solely become an influencer, but it's a good tool to have. There's only a specific amount or a handful of ways that you can make money on the internet. So to have as many income streams and revenue streams as you can is beneficial. So to be able to learn from somebody and to see how they negotiate things and make connections, that's a big one too, has been really, really helpful.
Yeah, you almost never. I feel I've come from minimum wage jobs, and you kind of hear like, oh, there's someone's offering me $100, and you think like this is a big deal, and
Yeah.
it's nice to get your first brand deal. Most people never forget like their first deal or two they got, but like I just switched something up with the people that sell me podcast ads, and a deal went from $500 to 2,000. And, I,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say the same amount of words as I was going to say before.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lesson to be learned about. It's really simple for those that are looking to get into content, podcasts, whatever. The product is how many views or watch hours or clicks you get. And then for doing the same amount of time, you can quickly expand. Like if we ran a bakery, it's going to cost me 80 cents for every muffin I make. When you do content, you spend the same amount of time doing something, but can you explode it to a bigger audience? And it seems
Mhm.
like that's why I love talking to folks like you. I do a lot with Reality Steve and other content creators because we all kind of came from the same place, which is you start talking about things you have either some knowledge about or that are fun to talk about, right? You have
Mhm.
to have some of those passions. And then it's almost like the lightning finds its way to the ground. And then, the algorithm will tell you like, oh yeah, you're doing well with this. If Okay, so a lot of if things got to a level where like you had to where people were like, Morgan, we need more shows from you. What's something outside of reality TV you think you would have an itch to dive into in parallel to what you're doing?
Oh gosh, I really don't think my brain could handle anything else if they did. Um, but honestly, if I were to ever switch niches, I would be a true crime girly. And what is so fascinating, and I feel like I'm really missing out on an opportunity here. Maybe I need to, get things rolling. But my husband, David, doesn't know anything about like the biggest true crime America. He had no idea who JonBenet Ramsey was until like last week when we watched the
Oh,
documentary. He didn't know about OJ Simpson. He didn't know about the Menendez brothers. So I feel like I really missed out on an opportunity of a great podcast idea to teach my South African husband about all of these, huge American true crime stories. First of all, people just love to listen to his accent. And then to couple that, with the true crime aspect, maybe someday in the future we'll do a endeavor of that.
It's interesting because true crime is fantastic, but it involves so much research. Whereas pop culture, so short, it's like we're on the beach and we're just going to talk about whatever washes ashore. Like
Yeah.
we're not uncovering. It's like who said something that was so dumb, everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of pop culture stories that aren't reality TV. There are literal, like in 2024, we have Haley Welch, we have Luigi Mangione. Are you
Mhm.
covering any of these non-reality pop culture stories? Because Luigi Mangione he's popular culture, this guy,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not. Like, do you cover anything outside of that reality realm?
Yeah, I do. Anything that, like you said, is making its way into popular culture, whether it is something like the Menendez brothers or now Luigi Mangione. I mean, I'm not the end all be all. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not the best place to go for that type of, content that you want, but I can tell you what you need to know about it. And that's kind of where I have the balance. And honestly, I got a lot of practice of covering not similar stories, but stuff that is legalistic in nature because of housewives lawsuits and Tom Girardi and all of those things. So I started to dip my toes in more serious aspects because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to report on that type of stuff. You always have to say allegedly. You have to make sure you get the facts right. Otherwise, you could get sued. I mean, better than anybody else, right?
Yeah. And I did the right things, and I still got sued. What the fuck? Yeah, no. There's a Bravo podcast of lawyers that just
Mhm.
fought Bravo lawsuits. I mean, you have Brian Friedman, this power attorney who's represented Gabrielle Union. He represented Cassie Randolph against Colton Underwood. He's representing now the Menendez brothers, and he's representing Rachel Leviss. And I'm telling you right now, Rachel Leviss, I would be surprised if she doesn't walk away with at least $1 million in her pocket, because what they're finding out about Bravo being complicit in investigating James Kennedy and putting them on TV together, what all of that, I think there's more skeletons we don't know about. And a lot of it was on camera. that, there could be a scene, a scene allegedly of him pushing, was it Rachel into a bush, or Kristen,
Kristen.
one of his exes into a bush. And then it's like that the liability is huge that they kept this guy around. So yeah, the legal aspect of pop culture, anything really worth talking about probably has a lot of legal aspects to it. What a year, from P Diddy and Jay-Z to all the Bravo stuff and the Hawk Tuah. Have you followed the Hawk Tuah crypto scam?
I haven't, but what's interesting is like David and I will trade hot gossip, right? He will tell me about, Rory McIlroy getting divorced and then not getting divorced. And I'll tell him about Scandival. And then he'll turn around and tell me about the Bitcoin scandal. And I'm just like, okay, what? And I said, that should be one of my podcast episodes one day, is like, okay, I'll tell you what's going on TV. You tell me, like, what is this Bitcoin scandal? Because he was all over it. He could explain it to me 12 times and I still won't understand it, but I appreciate his passion for it, and I will always, lend an ear.
Well, what the funny part is after it was kind of exposed that there was either insider trading or a lot of, I mean, they basically took her brand, and I don't think she had any idea what she was getting herself into. And they call it rug pulling. They pulled the rug out after releasing this product, and everyone lost money on it right away. And she basically was in one of those like those Twitter live chats, and she was like, "All right, guys, I gotta go. I'll talk to you later." And you could tell there was a lawyer being like, "Get off of there." She was like, "Going to sleep. Hooty hoo. See you tomorrow." And then no one hears from her for 15 days.
Wow.
And then today she comes out and says she's going to be working with all the people that have lost money and try to. I think she was just a sucker who went from working in a spring factory to
Right.
getting fame to the point
Mhm.
where leeches come out, and that's what's great about, I think, when you come up slowly, is that you don't have the leeches coming after you, and you've got, what you've built up, and you just learn a lot. But boy, yeah, the predatory nature of going viral out there. Have you had to deal with any mental health struggles with it all? I mean, was it worse dealing with radio radio trolls or the internet?
Oh, the internet, hands down. Yeah, the internet is a wild place. Honestly, yeah, long answer short, yes. I think anybody in this field has their days where their mental health is not the best, but honestly, for a number of different reasons. One could be people in your comment section, but sometimes I struggle with, talking about hard things. Talking about James Kennedy and his past is hard for me. I'm an empathetic person by nature, so I look at James and I say he's troubled and he needs help, but that can't come at the expense of someone else,
Mm.
So who's of the most importance is obviously people in this situation like Raquel and Allie and Kristen. But I can't change that part of me that also sees James Kennedy as someone who probably needs some treatment as well. So I struggle with that a lot because the internet always wants to paint things as black and white, and I'll say something that I know in my heart is coming from a good place, but then I'll sit there and think about it, all day. Today, perfect example. I posted a clip from my latest podcast episode talking about how the situation with James Kennedy and Scandival, right? Like, does what we know now change your opinion about Raquel and her involvement in Scandival? Not that I'm condoning what she did in any way. I'm not. And like I said, Ariana can't be collateral damage in that. But at the same time, it gives more context as to the mental place that someone like Raquel was in when she ended up being involved with Tom Sandoval. Is it easier for somebody like Raquel to fall into a trap, set by somebody who might see her as more vulnerable without knowing that full extent, right? I said that, and people are like going off on me in the comment section, like, how dare you? I can't believe you, like, all these things. And I'm like, there's more nuance to it than people ever want to acknowledge that there is. And I internalize that. Well, did I do something wrong? And am I, not that I need any allegiance to anybody, but it's like, Ariana went through this huge heartbreak, and am I minimizing that? It's like, no, multiple things can be true at the same time. And I've had to learn that I'm the only person really that knows my heart and soul when
Mm.
I'm sharing an opinion. And if other people don't receive it, there's really nothing that I can do about that. So I shouldn't beat myself up over it.
I feel like we have a very similar empathy that exists because it's almost like the pain comes from feeling mischaracterized. And who doesn't want, everyone wants to be understood. And the comment section is where nuance goes to die.
Mhm.
And it's where people that have a strong opinion get polarized in one direction or another. I'll go so far as to say, sure, I can have empathy for Rachel Leviss. I was, I mean, I got the receipts too. I was watching that Bravo finale. I watched it live at a bar in New York City with my wife, and we were like, yikes. I mean, they were like the mob mentality. It's true what they say. When people get together, the collective IQ drops. It's
Yeah.
mobs are dumb, and people had it out for her. And she was in blotchy skin, and she's frail, and she's can't get a word in, and yeah, everyone's 10 years older yelling at her. And also, and this is where you lose people, is if you really want to get into the game of like everyone's really messed up, is Tom Sandoval's messed up. He spent the last 10 years of his life doing, and I don't even watch the show, I'm just saying that like he spent the last 10 years of his life trying to make it in LA. And I had a show, I did a stand-up show, and Billy Lee was on it, I think that's her name, and they were friends at the time. I think they've since, not been friends, but he was in the audience and he like laughed better. He laughed at my jokes more than everyone else. And I was like, oh, I kind of like this guy. Yeah, I was like, he's got a good sense of humor. Or I was like, I need to reevaluate my joke. But I saw this guy after who's like, waiting to be seen. And he was going out to party. And I'm like, I'm his age and I'm going out to like, I got to go get tacos for my pregnant wife at the time. Like, you just see that it's like, oh, while he has done bad things and cheated and said stupid things, he's a product of like being
Yeah.
rewarded for a decade for that.
Mhm.
And I'm not here to judge, but as you know, when there's a hotbed issue, if you're on the wrong side of that, God, I mean, people were coming after me for being like, hey, I don't think Greg Grippo's that bad of a guy, And
Yeah.
how could you? And it's the same
Yeah.
every year. It's so funny to see.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I have a hard time thinking you ever get any hate because I see
Oh,
your
I
content
do.
as very measured. So I think it goes to show that even the Pope has a bad Yelp review once.
Well, thank you for comparing me to the Pope. I'll take
Oh,
it.
yeah, you're the Morgan's Pope culture here, Pope talk. Morgan. So we got to wrap it up. What's your biggest what what content stream are you trying to grow the most in 2025? What's like tell me a business like thought about where you're looking to improve this year.
I mean, honestly, I'm looking to improve all over the board. I want to hit 200,000 on Instagram. I really want to grow my Patreon. Patreon is hard. I feel like, especially in, maybe I need some pointers from you, but when you do a news Patreon, people can really get it for free anywhere. So how do you make yours stand out? That's something that I've tried to work through this year, with getting like merch and discounts and personal life stuff. But also, I I have this conversation too, and don't take it the wrong way, people, because I'm still going to be doing this, but I know that I don't want to be in pop culture forever. I don't want to be like 50 still talking about, Vanderpump Rules reboot 4.0. So what is it going to look like then? So I think for 2025, I just want to start to put my feelers out of other things that I have interest in that could, still fall under the umbrella of who Morgan P Talks is, whether that's just everyday content, if and when I do become a mother, all of those types of thoughts. Just where is the trajectory of my career? I don't want to just limit myself to only talking about, television. So that's something that I'm mulling over in the new year.
Yeah, look, I mean, you just keep on building your audience and they're going to grow with you as well. And that's the beauty, is you'll have these people continue to have a nice parasocial relationship and you'll be seen as a friend. I always say podcasting, it's like you're someone's work companion. You are someone's like little dopamine boost while they take the bus to work. You know what I mean? Like you don't
Yeah.
even know how important you are to a lot of strangers out there. So yeah, but that'll be great. We're looking forward to seeing kind of how you grow. And I've enjoyed following your content. I'd love to, I don't know if I have any tips on how to grow your Patreon other than getting sued, but I always tell people like, hey, do it do it for you. If like I'm a one-man shop, and Patreon is a quick way to support me if you want. And when you'll show your Patreon, like they're gonna get something unique out of being in the Patreon community, but at the same time, it keeps you being honest and able to do your job and not cover stupid stories you don't want to cover. It provides you more independence, and I think you're like real hardcore loyal fans, they'll eat that up. But anyhow, you're on Instagram at Morgan P Talks, and Morgan's Pop Talks on the podcast apps. So anything else we can promote for you before we go?
I think you got it all. Thanks, Dave.
Well, thanks so much, and don't be a stranger. Come back anytime and give us updates, because we always love to hear from you.
Of course. And you're coming on my show too in 2025. So we'll book it.
Let's do it. All right. There it is, folks. Have a good one. Happy New Year's. We'll catch you next year.